Good morning and happy Sunday. Welcome to our Sunday service, streaming to you live here in Austin, Texas, Unity Church of the Hills. We're grateful for the opportunity to connect our hearts with yours. Take a moment and say hello to your fellow love streamers. Let us know where you are watching from. I wanted to take a moment and just thank everyone who participated in Unity's World Day of Prayer. From our prayer chaplains and licensed Unity teachers to our laity, and to Dr. Paul Hubbard, who brought his crystal bowl sound healing energy. The 24 hours that we spent steeped in affirmative prayer was rich and powerful. And I truly believe that we have set an intention that is going to continue to move us through this year as we answer the call together to where we are being pulled by Spirit. If you missed the World Day of Prayer service or the 24 hours of prayer, they are available on Facebook and on our YouTube channel. So our Sharing is Caring campaign continues to do good work in the world. The last 2 weeks, we focused our efforts towards AmeriCares and the support that they're providing for Hurricane Laura. And starting next Sunday, we're going to focus our hearts and our energies and our financial good towards those affected by the fires that are raging in the West Coast. For today, though, we're focusing on an organization called Foster Village, and I want to tell you guys a little bit about them. They were founded in 2016, and they are led by experienced foster parents, child development experts, child welfare advocates, and a board that is made up of passionate and diverse community of professionals. They support foster children and families in the child welfare system by providing emotional and physical support. So if that tugs at your heart, all you have to do is share the message today while we are live, and we'll donate $5 towards Foster Village. Again, it is our joy to connect our hearts with yours. You're invited to settle in as we begin our Sunday service.
One love, one heart, let's get together and feel alright. Hear the children crying, hear the children crying, saying thanks and praise to the Lord, and I will feel alright. Let's get together and feel alright. Whoa, 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 whoa. Let them all pass, all the dirty remarks. There is one question I'd really love to ask. Is there a place for those who make mistakes, who hurt all mankind just to save his own? Believe me, one love. What about the one heart? What about the love? As it was in the beginning, so shall it be in the end. Oh, give thanks and praise to the Lord, and I will feel alright. Let's get together and feel alright. One more thing. Let's get together to stop this holy Armageddon. It's all in your mind. There will be a no doom. Have pity on those whose chances are growing thinner. There ain't no hiding place from the Father of creation. Sing it. One love, heart. What about the love? Get together and feel alright. One love, one heart, give thanks and praise to the Lord, and I will feel alright. Let's get together and feel alright. One more. Let's get to pass all the dirty remarks. There is one question I'd really love to ask. One heart. Is there a place for those who make mistakes, who hurt all mankind just to save their own? Believe me, one love. What about the one heart? What about the love? Get together and feel alright, as it was in the beginning. One love. So shall it be in the end. Oh Lord, give thanks and praise to the Lord, and I will feel alright. Let's get together and feel alright. I'm pleading to mankind. One love. Oh Lord, one heart. Give thanks and praise to the Lord, and I will feel alright. Let's get together and feel alright. Give thanks and praise to the Lord, and I will feel alright. Let's get together and feel alright. Give thanks and praise to the Lord, and I will feel alright.
Thank you, Celebration, for the opening song. Welcome to Unity Church of the Hills. We are so grateful for all of you watching today. We take a moment and give thanks for all of our prayer chaplains holding space today. To receive one-on-one prayer following today's service, please call 512-814-5365. You can leave a message with your name, phone number, and a request, and a chaplain will call you back. Our children, youth, angels, and teachers continue to meet virtually in all formats like Facebook groups and Zoom. We take a moment to focus our hearts on all of them and behold the Christ in them. You can learn more about our youth ministry at unityhills.org. Our vision statement will appear on your screen in a moment. I would invite you to speak it aloud, affirming the truth of who you are called to be in the world. Together, we are an ever-expanding community of love and acceptance where lives are transformed. If you are joining us for the first time today, welcome. Unity is a positive path for spiritual living that honors all paths to God. Wherever you are in your spiritual path, we'll gladly meet you there. If you want to know more about us, just type the word connect in the comments and an ambassador will reach out to you. And now we take a moment to turn within and get centered through our opening prayer. O sweet and loving Spirit, we take this moment to breathe into this shared sacred space. We are so grateful for this time to come together, to pause, remember, and breathe. We breathe into our humanity. We breathe into our beingness. We breathe into the grace that is latent in the gaps of our lives, and we call upon you, sweet Spirit, to reveal that grace in ways that we can clearly see it, feel it, and know it. And most of all, we willingly see and feel and hold that grace for ourselves and for each other. We offer our deepest thanks for the abundance of everything good that is right here awaiting us. We affirm and know that in you we live and move and have our being. And in you we awaken to the truth of our oneness that is ever present. We are so grateful to be here in our spiritual community as Unity Church of the Hills and as human beings shining our lights in service to the world. And so it is, and so we let it be. Amen.
This week's Sharing is Caring benefits Foster Village. For every share of the message while we are live, we'll donate $5 to this wonderful organization. Please take a moment and share today's message. We are now scheduling small groups of up to 10 people to meet outdoors on campus. Contact Audrey Simpson at audrey.simpson@unityhills.org to learn about the safety protocols involved and to reserve a spot. If you haven't already made concrete plans to paint rocks for the community garden, don't quarry, there's still time. Rock painting continues through the month of September. Come and enjoy the cooler temps out on our patio while you let your creativity run wild. All materials are provided, and rock painters enjoy a 10% discount at our bookstore. In October, you'll have an opportunity to adopt rocks like Rockford, whose life got off to a rocky start when he ended up in a heap. However, he's been reimagined into something beautiful and is eager for his October adoption on a love offering basis. Dr. Dan Stasiak has returned to his offering, Learn to Meditate class the second Tuesday of every month via Zoom. If you're wanting to strengthen or even develop your meditation skills, Dr. Dan goes through the steps of superconscious meditation from the Institute of the Himalayan tradition. The class is offered on a love offering basis this Tuesday, September 15th, from 7 to 8 p.m. Register in advance for the Zoom link. Can you believe that we are 2 months away from turning 25 as a spiritual community? When I turned 25, a very, very long time ago, I was asking big questions about where I was going, what I wanted to do, and who I wanted to be. Well, as a spiritual community, we're asking those same questions. And more importantly, we are listening so that we can hear and then answer the call from Spirit. And this idea of answering the call really kicked off with our World Day of Prayer. And it continues later today at 2 p.m. with Dr. Roger Teal. He'll take us through a powerful process he calls Bridges to Breakthrough. Offered on a love offering basis, Dr. Roger's webinar is the perfect opportunity for our community to intentionally reflect, heal, and prepare for our way forward as a spiritual community. Please register at unityhills.org before 2 p.m. today to receive the Zoom link. We answer the call of Spirit by consciously creating community and belonging through activities such as our Spirit Circles. Our fall series begins later this week, and there are still groups available to join. And finally, we are asking you to answer the call to help us plan the 25th anniversary celebrations. Despite this pandemic, we are going to celebrate. And although it may not be in the same way we've celebrated in the past, we will make it special and meaningful. We are looking for people who will run with an agreed-upon idea to work with a team and make it happen. And if that's you, please email Ellen Fannin at fannonellen@gmail.com. She'll be setting up the initial planning meeting in the coming days. Now, for today's meditation, we are going to focus our hearts and our collective prayer intention on the West Coast, where fires are raging, surrounding our brothers and sisters there in our love and our light. So I invite you to close your eyes as we take a sacred journey from our heads to our hearts, breathing in, letting go. Once again, breathing in and sighing it out. Allow your sense of connection with all of life. We invite into this field with us all those of a higher dimension of being, our ascended masters, our angels and teachers, our guides, and our own Christ presence, that level of our being where we have embodied our divine potential. Allow this vibration to be palpable and present with you, with us, as we collectively focus our hearts on the West Coast with a powerful intention of relief. You might imagine angels flying over the fires, arms outstretched, radiating a healing balm. Or Jesus walking through the flames, whispering, "Peace, be still." The vibration of his consciousness ripples out like calming water, and the fires dissolve where he walks. Or you may simply rest in your own loving heart, sending ripples of white light to all of those affected, shoring up the firefighters, comforting the afflicted, the weary, the grieving. The Holy Spirit, as a divine nurturing presence, wraps this situation in infinite, unconditional, harmonizing love. Continue to fortify this field of wholeness as you rest as love in the silence. All things are possible. So we release this affirmative intention into the law of love, into God, through God, for fulfillment, knowing it is done, and so it is. Amen. When you are ready, open your beautiful eyes.
Yeah, we got a good thing, people. Whenever life is hard, we'll never lose our way, 'cause we all know who we are. Who knows about tomorrow? We don't know what's in the stars. We just know that we can follow the light that's in our hearts. But I'm not worried about us, and I've never been. We know how the story ends. We will never break. We will never break. Build on a foundation strong enough to stay. We will never break. As the water rises and the mountains shake, our love will remain. We will never, no, no, never. We will never, no, no, never. It's more than a good sensation. It's more than a passing thing. God is the explanation of what love really means. It's bigger than you and me. It's 1 + 1 = 3. When we talk about forever, then forever's what we mean. So I'm not worried about us, and I've never been. No matter what might come our way, we will never break. We will never break. Build on a foundation stronger than the pain. We will never break. As the water rises and the mountains shake, God's love will remain. We will never, no, no, never. We will never, no, no, never. We will never, no, never. We will know. The world seems dangerous. Throw it all at us. There's nothing we cannot take. We will never break. We will never break. Build on a foundation strong enough to stay. we will never break. As the water rises and the mountains shake, God's love will remain. We will never, no, never. We will never, no, never. We will never, no, never. We will, no.
Beautiful. Thank you, Tom. So beautiful. So just the other day, I was driving in the car with my 4-year-old when he asked me, Lala, when will we die? I'm sitting there driving down the road thinking about how I'm going to get him moved into Paw Patrol and transitioned before my 5 o'clock Board of Trustees meeting. I wasn't really thinking about existential questions of life and death. But 4-year-olds, I've learned, don't really understand timing, nor do they really care. So he's looking out the window, and I'm driving along, and all of a sudden, it's just like, how am I going to answer this? And it comes to me that, and I said, Silas, death and life are part of the great mystery, and we don't know when we're born and when we'll die. And that seemed to satisfy him for a little while. But it made me think later about this idea of the great mysteries, and I believe that grace is one of those mysteries as well. And I ask you today to really consider that idea of grace, of it being a currency in your life. And what does it mean to you? What does grace feel like for you? When do you call upon grace in your own life? And how do you know when you're needing to lean into those gaps in your own life to fill that space with grace? I know for me, one of the biggest places that I can get stuck is that gap between my heart and my head, between fear and love, and of course, between this wrestle that we're all in of being human and being divine. And I realized for me over my life that I can get thrown out of balance when I forget. When I forget that in my humanity, if I get stuck there, I can get thrown out of balance and forget my compassion and my connection. And if I get stuck in my beingness and just want to sit in my meditation space, in my lily pad all day, that I can forget my purpose is to have a human experience. And when I can get thrown out of balance in my human beingness, I can get buckled down in fear, in smallness, and in pettiness, and in judgment and comparison. But what if we could lean into those gaps and not fill them? What if we allow God to fill those spaces? Because the miracle I've learned is sometimes most profound in our brokenness, in our no-thingness. Because just like it's the music, the notes that fill the space to make the melody, when we allow God into those gaps in our own lives to fill those with grace, we allow God to do God's most perfect work. Several months ago, the Board of Trustees had our retreat, our annual retreat in January. And at that retreat, we were led by Shannon Prusher in doing this activity called kintsugi. And if you're familiar with kintsugi, it's the art of creating something beautiful out of something broken. And at that time in our spiritual community, we were coming out of last fall, we were wrestling with some big questions and uncertainties, each of us individually and collectively as a spiritual community. And little did we know when we met in January what we were about to face with the pandemic. So as we sat there around the table that day, we took this chalice and we each took turns. Shannon had epoxied the cracks back together. This is a chalice that I believe originated from a staff member, and we blessed it, and she blessed it, and she glued it back together. And then we each took turns using a golden paint to paint the cracks and crevices of this chalice. And we blessed the chalice that day, and we blessed it for it symbolized that essence, right, of being broken and feeling disconnected and coming back together to create the whole in a whole new way, and allowing that grace, that glitter, that gold, that God stuff to fill those gaps. Similarly, when I was a child, I sat around a table during 2 years of confirmation classes. You see, I grew up in the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, ELCA, which is often known as the Liberal Lutherans. And we would sit around the table every Wednesday from 4 to 6 p.m. in these confirmation classes. And there's not a lot I remembered about that time in my life. I was a teenager. I really was concerned mostly with playing Nerf football with my friends on the church lawn. I was really concerned with who was going to get to the Little Debbie snack cakes first. And of course, did I have enough change for the Coke machine, which was those great bottles that you would pull out. You know, you'd put your coins in and you'd open the glass and pull out the glass bottle. And I had so many memories of that. And in all those years, much to the dismay of my pastor, there's only one real spiritual lesson that I remember from those times together. And it was the day Pastor Joe talked to us about grace. And something about that lesson resonated so deeply for me because it was about this idea of this guy named Martin Luther who left the Catholic Church largely for fundamental differences, but one of those core differences being that Martin Luther believed that grace was bestowed upon us. It didn't require anything of us. It wasn't a prerequisite to being alive, that God's love was so big and so infinite that it could fill the gaps in our own lives. And so I've come to realize that for me over the years, that is a key and fundamental place that we're called into. And really, I think it's the core definition of grace. If you look up the word grace in Merriam-Webster online, you'll find lots of definitions. But the one that strikes me is this one, around this idea of sanctification and purification. I tend to think of grace as an umbilical cord to the divine. This idea that we can be connected at all times to the divine if we allow ourselves to lean into that space. Especially because in our human side of our lives, we can get stuck, right? Believing that we have to get it all done, that we have to be perfect. At least for me, I'm really starting to lean into the Enneagram, and I'm realizing as an Enneagram 2 that this is a core piece of my life, is trying to figure out how to please and perfect and do all of those things. But there's a time and a place where I can just be, that I don't have to be doing something all the time, that I'm worthy of love even when I forget, because I'm always connected in this divine nourishment with the divine through grace. There's another key definition around grace that really speaks to me, and it's the place of grace that we hold for one another. Again, in Merriam-Webster, it says grace is a disposition or an act or an instance of kindness. Because as I've learned, the more room that we make for ourselves, the more room we can make for others, that they can mess up, that they can get it wrong, that they can send us a weird email and we can forgive them. And I think this is especially important right now in our world where we see so many instances of disconnect, right? So many seemingly appearances of judgments and comparisons. And I know in my own life right now, I am working through a key place of learning what it really means to be an anti-racist and giving myself grace in that space of not knowing, giving myself grace for my own ignorance, for my own false narratives, for the hidden assumptions and deep-seated stories that I didn't even know were there. And really asking myself as a privileged white woman, what can I do? How can I show up to help? And y'all, it's scary work. It's vulnerable work. Uh-oh. Okay. Because I'm a word person and I'm always interested in knowing the real meaning behind the words beyond what I was taught with Martin Luther in our confirmation classes. And of course, the definition is similar, right? An unmerited divine assistance given to humans for their regeneration or sanctification. I tend to think of grace in common terms as an umbilical cord to the divine, because we are always present, we're always connected, we are always nourished by this connection as we lean in, even when we mess up, even when we don't get things crossed off our to-do list, even when dishes are sitting in the sink. We don't have to get it all done. We don't have to be perfect. We are worthy of love as we are, right where we are. And there's another definition of grace that I think speaks to this in an also equally profound way, and that's that grace is a disposition to, or an act or instance of kindness. Because as I'm learning, the more room I can make for myself, the more self-compassion, the more curiosity I can have about myself, the more I can make room for others. And the biggest place in my life right now where I'm having to lean into this is in this notion of anti-racism. And I'm coming face to face with my own ignorance, my own hidden assumptions and false narratives about race and what does that look like in our world. And there's a part of me that would rather shy away and bury my head and just sit in my meditation space and pretend like these things are not happening. But it's also incumbent upon me as a human and as a privileged white woman to understand my place in this. How can I hold grace for myself and others? It's scary work, y'all. It's vulnerable. It's uncomfortable. As part of this exploration, I'm reading the book right now with a book study called How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. Similarly, in this book, Kendi talks about this notion of racism, his own racism as a black man, his own lack of awareness and understanding, and his own shortcomings in holding grace for himself and his brothers and sisters. One of the things that's really speaking to me right now as I'm exploring this book is this idea of dueling consciousness, of how do you hold these two seemingly disconnected ideas, and how do you find your way through them? This isn't a new idea that Kendi brings to light. It's a term that W.B. Du Bois brought to light in 1903 when he talked about his struggle to be both anti-racist, to be a black man in America, and to be an American. And Kendi talks about in this book the importance of giving ourselves grace because our identities are fluid, right? Much like our spiritual journeys, we're always evolving, we're always shifting, we're always growing, we're always leveling up. He says the good news is that racists and anti-racists are not fixed identities. We can be a racist one minute and anti-racist the next. What we say about race, what we do about race, in each moment determines what, not who, we are. I believe it's time right now in our world where we're being called into this deeper space. We're still, many of us, sheltering in place. We're still disconnected and distanced from one another. And I know for me in my own life, it's a time of reflection, of understanding, where am I being called forward? What is mine to do? Because the world will come back together. And what does that world look like? What vision are we holding for that new earth? Indian author Arundhati Roy talks about this in her writing, and she says that this pandemic is about moving into a new portal. It's about moving into a new way, right? About moving through to allow this new earth to emerge. As I really explored this idea of grace, I also, of course, had to turn to our sacred text in Unity, which is A Course in Miracles. Because the Course in Miracles really speaks to this idea, right, that we're facing in our world right now of these disconnects. In fact, the very definition of grace, according to Lesson 169, verse 2, is grace is acceptance of the love of God within a world of seeming hate and fear. By grace alone, the hate and fear are gone, for grace presents a state so opposite to everything the world contains that those whose minds are lighted by the gift of grace cannot believe the world of fear is real. I just want to say that again because I want you to really get this. Those whose minds are lighted by the gift of grace cannot believe the world of fear is real. But it's a struggle sometimes, isn't it? Not getting pulled into the fear, not getting swept up into the judgment and comparison. But when we are willing to lean back into our beingness, we can see the oneness. We can feel the unity. And when we can look through the eyes of grace in our humanity, we can see differences of ideas, differences of opinions, and we can hold space for one another. Because right now is a time not to shy away, but a time to dig in, a time to dig deeper into our humanity and reach higher into our beingness. And this week, as you move forward, I'd invite you to just ask yourself one question. When you feel that twinge of fear, ask yourself, am I buckling down in fear or am I leveling up in love? Because the more that we can level up in love, the more we can make room for all of life. We can create a world full of grace where we honor each other, where we see each other, where we hold each other, even if we don't agree. And this, I believe, is what it means to have heaven on earth. One of the most simplest and most complex acts that we can do is to allow ourselves to just simply be and breathe in grace. Sometimes when we're in the midst of that discomfort and not sure and uncertainty, we want to fix it. We want someone to fix it. But the more we can lean back into the breath, the more we can lean back into our breath to connect with the divine, we can remember the great I am. Or use the mantra Hamsa, I am that. Because as we know in our unity second principle, our essence is of God. We are inherently good. This God essence was fully expressed as Jesus the Christ. One of the most profound books that I'm also reading right now is called The Universal Christ by Richard Rohr. And in this book, Rohr talks about this notion of Jesus being a Christ, being that essence in the world. But he talks about it in a way that I haven't heard many fathers, many of the Christian faith talk about, that in a really all-inclusive way. In fact, he talks about God as an all-inclusive God, as opposed to a tribal God that many religions over the years have created. And his message is very akin to that here in Unity, where he talks about that God loves things by becoming them. He writes, Christ is the light that allows people to see things in their fullness. The precise and intended effect of such a light is to see Christ everywhere else. In fact, it is my only definition of a true Christian. A mature Christian sees Christ in everything and everyone else. That is a definition that will never fail you, always demand more of you, and give you no reason to fight, exclude, or reject anyone. For when we live in this space of grace, when we allow Spirit to fill the gaps of our understanding, those gaps between head and heart, those gaps between human and being, we allow ourselves to be in that Christ light. So as we close and as you move into your day and hopefully move into this workshop this afternoon with Roger Teal, and think about in your own life what bridges to breakthrough you're experiencing or want to experience, I'd invite you to remember it's as simple as looking at the sun. In his final chapter of The Untethered Soul, Michael Singer writes, "Your relationship with God is the same as your relationship with the sun. If you hid from the sun for years and then chose to come out of darkness, the sun would still be shining, as if you had never left. You don't need to apologize. You just pick up your head and you look at the sun. It's the same when you decide to turn toward God. You just do it. If instead you allow guilt and shame to interfere, that's just your ego blocking the divine flow. You can't offend the divine. Its very nature is light, love, compassion, protection, and giving. You can't make it stop loving you. It's just like the sun. You can't make the sun stop shining on you. You can only choose not to look at it. The moment you look, you'll see it's there." So as we close and you move into your week, I'd invite you to tune back into your umbilical cord, to level up in love, and to remind yourself of the Christ that you are. Because it's not enough to hold this grace that we feel from the divine, but we must share it in the world. We must hold it for one another, because that's what we came here to do as human beings. So as we move now in our service, I invite you into our offering. We also, of course, have our Bridges to Breakthrough this afternoon. Just one more announcement about that. It's going to be a really rich and beautiful time. If you don't know the work of Dr. Roger Teal, he's an amazing, amazing man whose light shines so beautifully. So I look forward to seeing you there. And it's now in the time in our service when we get to give to support this beautiful spiritual home and practice the law of abundance and circulation. So there are many ways that you can give. You can give, they're showing to you now on your screen, whether you're giving through our app, our text to give online, or by mail. We are grateful for your generosity and know that it will return to you tenfold. So let's speak our offering affirmation together. Divine love through me blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I circulate, and I am grateful. Thank you.
Smile, though your heart is aching. Smile, even though it's breaking. When there are clouds in the sky, you'll get by. If you smile through your fear and sorrow, smile, maybe tomorrow you'll see the sun come shining through for you. Light up your face with gladness, hide every trace of sadness, although a tear may be ever so near. That's the time you must keep on trying. Smile, what's the use of crying? You'll find that life is still worthwhile if you just smile. Our smiling faces, an earth-like star. A frown can't bring out the beauty that you are. Love within, you'll begin smiling. There are brighter days ahead. Ooh. Don't mess your face up with bitter tears, 'cause life is gonna be what it is. to see, 'cause you're as joyful as a Christmas tree. Love within, you begin, smile and please. There are brighter days ahead. Ooh. Love's not competing, it's on your side. You're in life's picture, so why must you cry? So for a friend, please begin, smile please, yeah. There are brighter days ahead.
Be sure to stick around after our prayer for protection as Laura Zulke goes deeper with her message, and be thinking about questions that you want to ask her. And then join us at 2 p.m. as Dr. Roger Teal offers his special webinar via Zoom, Bridges to Breakthrough. It's on a love offering basis, and there is still time to sign up. Now let's speak our prayer for protection together. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is swell. You guys have questions, go ahead and drop them in the comments. But I wanted to start with, so why do you think that it's sometimes a struggle for us to receive grace?
Well, I think that our human condition is struggling with unworthiness. Yeah. And at the core of it, it's this idea that I think so many of us are born into, that we must do something in order to receive, right? You must give to receive. So just the idea of receiving and just being in our receivership, I think is really uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's really powerful. That there doesn't need to be a reciprocity, right? That we're already worthy.
Right.
That's beautiful.
Part of
Thank you.
Divine
and so Grace Webster defined it, Merriam-Webster, as unmerited divine assistance. What do you think, though, our role is, if any? You've said we're worthy, right? But are there things that we can do to prepare ourselves to receive more grace?
Absolutely. I think you have to be willing to listen. I think you have to be willing to hold self-compassion.
Right.
You know, for those gaps that we don't understand. And I think sometimes, you know, one of the things I didn't say, I kind of had it in the talk and then kind of pulled it back out, is that sometimes grace doesn't look like joy.
Right.
Sometimes grace looks like I'm pissed off, I'm angry, I'm having issues, like I'm feeling broken. And how can I be in that space and still create a container for myself? And I think that's sometimes, you know, I was kind of in one of those spaces yesterday, and I think it's having people around you to hold you when you forget. And I think that's why spiritual community is so important, right? Is that we hold each other in that light when we forget.
So we're each channels of grace for each other.
Absolutely.
Beautiful. Well, so what other ways do you personally lean into grace when you feel disconnected? And maybe there's an experience that you've had similar to that.
Well, I think in terms of an experience, I think one of the most profound experiences of grace for me personally was in my coming out journey. You know, growing up in the church, as I mentioned, growing up Lutheran, being on the front row every Sunday, it was this huge disconnect within me of how do I simply show up and be who I am in the world and that be okay and that be enough. And so it was a long journey, a long and winding journey, because I ended up leaving the church. I felt disconnected. I felt like I didn't have a place, and I felt like I had to choose between my spirituality and being me. And so when I came back into the church, I found Unity of Dallas in 2004. It was uncomfortable to just show up and receive so much love and receive this message. And it was a number of years that I sort of had to wade through my own relationship with the divine to receive, right? Just in being who I am in the world. And it was really uncomfortable. It was really scary and really uncomfortable.
Yeah, but look at you now. It's amazing. And I apologize. So Facebook wasn't letting me know that I had comments with questions. So let me get back to y'all's questions here. So Neil wants you to tell us a little bit more about what your pastor said about grace and why it resonated with you.
I think it resonated, thanks for the question, Neil. I think it resonated because I did, as I mentioned, kind of realizing the role that I played in my life and my family's life. I was the peacemaker, the pleaser. I, tried to keep it all together. I was the kind of in between an older brother, younger sister, and so I learned I think I internalized at a very young age that I had to do something and I had to fix it and to help and to be this helper. And so there was always this sense of like, if I fulfill this need for someone, then my need would get met. And I think it resonated so deeply because it was the first time I'd really heard like this permission slip that I didn't have to do anything to be worthy to receive, right? I could just be me. I could just be a little 13-year-old Laura who wanted to eat Little Debbie's and play football. I was okay, and it was just so beautiful because it was like, I don't have to do anything. I can just receive this. And it was just so visceral. I mean, I could see the pastor standing there. I was like, I remember nothing else about confirmation but that. Poor Pastor Joe.
That's a good one to remember, though. And then let's see, I've got another question here. So what, if any, was there a grace you experienced in preparation of your piece for today?
So that's a great,
I wonder if that's an inside question.
Yeah, I know, right? To Frank Phelan, who planted that question, Frank reached out to me last night and left me a beautiful message and kind of asked me if I was prepared. And I had, my inner mean girl was really strong yesterday, right? And so, I think when you get ready for a talk like this, it's always that little voice of like, who are you?
Right.
Who are you to stand up and talk about this? And I struggled with this talk. The talks that I've given here before just sort of flowed out of me. This one was a struggle. And so yesterday I just sort of woke up. I was grumpy. The bottom felt like it fell out. And finally about midday, my partner Jen grabs me and she's like, come sit with me on the couch. And then it just like, oof, like here it came. Like that sense of unworthiness. And can I just deliver this message? Can I be in a space of grace? Can I hold this grace for myself, right? Can I still, how can I show up to this and do it justice, right? It seems like such an enormous topic, and there's so many different ways you can go with it. And so I think, and then of course, my beautiful Marco Polo friends, Tracy Parthay and Jenny Wood, like having community hold you in that space when you can't hold it for yourself. I think is so key.
Absolutely.
Just to remind you, like you can be okay. And Tracy was the one who said, Laura, hold grace for yourself, right? Keep yourself in that grace. Like you don't have to get it right. So, I think I think at the end of the day, it's about showing up.
Yeah.
It's just, to me, it's that fifth principle, right? It's just showing up and shining your light. And sometimes that light feels a little dimmer, and then sometimes it feels really bright,
Right.
So.
Well, on behalf of our community here, thank you for showing up and delivering a powerful message today.
Thank you.
That we all need to hear about our worthiness and allowing grace in. So I've got some more questions that are flowing in here. What are some ways we can develop a habit of giving ourselves and others grace? That's a great question. So some of the habitual practices.
Yeah, I know. It's so funny. I kind of came late to the affirmation party. Like that's like new age, new thought 101. And it wasn't until probably about 4 years ago that I kind of got on the bandwagon. Of course, I had read, Louise Hay's "You Can Heal Your Life," and I would say affirmations for a while in my car. And I'm like, yeah, this is hokey. I'm not going to do this. But honestly, several years ago, and I have a podcast called Fit Over 40, and I talk a lot about my personal journey back home to myself, to embody my physicality. And one of the key tools that I used was actually affirmations. Like I had what I called power statements, and I'd put them in my car dashboard and in my mirror, and because I needed constant reminders, like I'd get so in my head that I'd forget, and of course I'd pray and meditate, but I needed something even simpler, right? And so I needed like this reminder, and one of my kind of power statements right now is remember who you are. Put on your crown and remember who you are. You don't have to back down from your life. Like you came here to be in your life. So.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. Well, and I know personally, because we're good friends, that you combine grace with another word.
Yes, grit. Yeah. So in my podcast, I talk a lot about grit and grace. I actually have a sign hanging, much to Jen's chagrin, in our bathroom that says grit and grace. I have signs all over the house. She's like, do you really need all these affirmations everywhere? I'm like, yes, I need to remember. Put your crown on. But that idea of grit and grace really came to me from my grandmother. My grandma Zolke was born in 1918. I talked about her actually in the rest of your story talk. She started her own business in her 50s. She had a 6th grade education. And she was so graceful, but there was just this like little edge to her of grit. And and to me, that idea of grit is about, it's not always going to go our way. Like I think in our spiritual communities, at least I'll speak for myself, like I just thought, this should be easier. Like, this should just be a lot easier. Like, I shouldn't have to face struggles. And listening to Jean's talk at 8 a.m., if you missed Jean Lean's beautiful service this morning at 8 on Facebook, go back and listen, because she talked about the reasons why we have these lessons that we go through, right? And I think sometimes it's just being able to come back into that. So to me, grit is about resilience, that I'm going to keep showing up. I'm going to show up to myself yesterday. I'm going to show up and be vulnerable with the people that I love, even though it's so scary, it's so scary to not have it all together all the time, right? And so how do we just show up and allow ourselves to be in that sort of divine flow of grit and grace? One day I feel like, I got this, and got my crown on, and then the next day I'm like, oh no, I don't know what's happening. The bottom just fell out.
All right, let me see. We're going to take 1 or 2 more questions. We want to give you all time to have a break before Roger Teal's workshop at 2. So let me just see if I've got just a comment. Thank you, Laura, for blessing us with sharing your vulnerability as well. And let's see if I've got it. No, I don't have any more questions. So do you have any closing comments that you want to leave everybody with out there?
Thank you. I mean, to me, this spiritual community embodies that idea of grace. Agreed. Having served now my 3rd term on the board of trustees, I get often asked a lot about the dynamic of serving on the board, and that word grace is what comes to me. Like this dynamic flow of being in that humanity and that beingness. And when we hit something hard, we lean back into prayer. When we, aren't sure how something's going to work, we turn it over to God. And to me, it's that divine flow. And I'm just really grateful. I'm really grateful for this place, and I'm grateful, and I'm excited for this afternoon. And I hope you'll all come back and join us, because I think right now we're all being called to lean in deeper and to reimagine what we need and want UCOH to be.
Absolutely.
What's ours to do within that. So
thank you so much, Laura. Absolutely. And thank all of you for being here with us today. We'll see you at 2 o'clock. We love you. Peace and blessings.